Jay Stone, and you're watching Tape with Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're gonna watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug. Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. My guest today is Jay Stone.
Hello, Rabbi Doug.
So glad to see you and have you back on the show again. We've been on each other's show, and it's a pleasure to have him back with me. Dr. Jay Stone is the people's candidate for mayor. Jay proposed two reforms that passed the Illinois General Assembly and were signed into law by Governor Quinn. Jay's working on ballot access to protect every voter and candidate running for office. Jay is interested in running for public office for a long time now. Actually, he started after he lobbied to increase airplane security prior to 9/11. He is the host of the TV show Inner Quest, and it's been my pleasure to be a guest on his show as well. He is a hypnotherapist. He is an author and a politician as well, and just so happy to have you with us, Jay. Tell me, what made you interested? Now, your father obviously is the vice mayor of Chicago, and he's running for, as he says, his final term before he's going to retire. What makes you interested in becoming mayor and not running as an alderman in your ward or running for a state representative? What specifically interests the mayor?
Well, I should tell you why I even ran for political office in the first place. I ran for alderman in 2003.
Correct.
In 2000, I found a knife on an airplane. I gave the knife to Rod Blagojevich with a letter that said, I asked Rod Blagojevich to lobby the FAA and his colleagues in Congress to stop allowing weapons on planes, and I was very persistent about it, and as a result, my safety concerns went to Congressman Pinsky, who was on the leading Illinois Democrat on the FAA committee. And then September 11th happened. Congressman Lipinski called me, Congressman Blagojevich called me, the FBI called me, want to know any other concerns they should be worried about. So initially I ran for office. I wanted to do my civic duty because I thought I could do a better job in office than the politicians. So I decided running for alderman would be the best job for me because I thought I knew a lot about city politics. So I had a meeting with the Intergovernmental Affairs Commissioner, John Doerr, and I told him about my ideas for good government, campaign financing reform, ethics reform, political competition, transparency. And next thing I know, there's 150 to 250 campaign workers campaigning against me. Well, in 2008, I won a civil rights lawsuit.
I remember that well.
Yeah. And so
I think you should tell them what the lawsuit was because you felt you were cheated in the fair process, right?
I not only, what happened was my opponent's campaign workers were paid for by the city of Chicago. So there's a civil rights is you can't be discriminated because of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. And so I was just, so the Shackman Decree says you can't discriminate because of political reasons. And so I was discriminated against, and as deemed by the federal court. And, I submitted testimony, federal court testimony, because the person who was the wrongdoer in the case testified at another trial. And the wrongdoer in this particular case is in federal prison. So then I started getting very active in city politics. I worked against the Olympics. I exposed some corruption.
Why? Can you tell us, because people who follow Jay Stone know that you were against the Olympics. What was the reason? What is the reason? Tell people why it wouldn't have been good for Chicago.
Well, there's...
I mean, just in a nutshell.
Well, in a nutshell, it took Toronto 31 years to pay off the Olympics. Vancouver, which it's not even a year old, already is in debt $1 billion. And when you put a plan for the Olympics, you have a forecast for revenues once the Olympics are over. Vancouver's going to go in further debt. London, which is hosting the next Olympics, they're already $10 billion over budget. But more importantly, the whole design of the Olympics was designed for corruption. And there was no public oversight because they were saying it was private, so there was no public oversight. They didn't have to open up the records. They didn't have to open up their employees. And what would have happened was...
It would have crippled Chicago financially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then you could add about whatever the cost was, 10%, the corruption tax. Mm-hmm. So, I'll tell you the corruption that I uncovered and was reported to the federal court monitor and to the Inspector General of Chicago, who was David Hoffman at the time. I discovered that, Aon Corporation, which chairman was Patrick Ryan, was leading the Olympic bid, Chicago's Olympic bid. And so Aon was supposedly donating millions of dollars in human services, office space, office supplies. And I discovered that Aon received $48 million in contracts. And so I saw it as public funding of the Olympics in an underhanded way, and most people would see that. So whatever Aon makes on those contracts, city contracts, more than made up for any money they spent on the Olympics. But what really was wrong, I feel, was that Aon chairman donated Patrick Ryan donated $100,000 to Mayor Daley, and another Aon executive donated $25,000 to Mayor Daley. And the city's ethics ordinance says you cannot donate just prior to receiving a contract. I think it's 2 years prior to the contract and 2 years after, because it looks inappropriate.
It's so interesting. Now, you must be constantly following, the in-depth news of what's going on in City Hall and what's going on as far as the financial state of the city, to be able to not only uncover this, but to want to run for mayor. You must have a lot of insights that the public doesn't have, who don't really follow those things outside of reading the newspaper. Right.
Well, first of all, I'm kind of a geek. I mean, I love to pore through government documents. I read the websites, and I would encourage the viewers, just to go beyond what you read in the newspapers, because I had no idea how much corruption there is until I really started to investigate. I uncovered the Aon contract and the campaign contributions on my own. Right now, and by the way, any citizen can file a Freedom of Information request. So last week I filed Freedom of Information request on the parking meter deal. And what most people don't realize is the parking meter lease was $1.1 billion, and but prior to that, the parking meter lease was in 2008, and that was deliberately made to get money for the Olympics, because there was questioning. There was a question.
Cash up front.
They needed money in reserve. Well, we've blown through that. But what most people don't realize is that the same company that has the parking meter lease also has the parking garage lease. And the parking garage lease went for $563 million. So that's just about half of what the parking meter lease is. And it went to the same company.
I never knew that.
Right. Well, it gets even worse, because at least with the parking meter lease, there was restrictions as to what the parking meter lease company could charge for parking. But with the parking garage lease, there's absolutely no cap. There's no provisions to regulate the cost of parking.
And it has gone up, way up.
Right. And what the company is doing is they're buying up smaller parking lots and creating a monopoly. So that's why it costs $27 to park at Navy Pier. But I did bring in something interesting. The company that's taken over the lease both the parking meter garage lease, or the parking meters and the parking garage lease, is Morgan Stanley. Now, Morgan Stanley in 2003 agreed to pay billions of dollars as a result of investigations and legal actions taken against them. In 2004, Morgan Stanley had a sexual discrimination suit that it settled for $54 million. The New York Stock Exchange imposed $19 million in January 2005. In 2006, they had a $42.5 million settlement. And my point is, what were we doing going in business with this company? Morgan Stanley stock, and in September 2008, it dropped 42%. And so Morgan Stanley was not a company that we should have been doing business with. It was a distressed company, and we did not do our due diligence. Morgan Stanley even tried to give the company away, and there was no takers because that company was so distressed. So we had no business giving our money to the rights to the parking garages and the rights to the parking meter lease to Morgan Stanley.
It's exactly one of the main things that I want to ask you today, along with talking about the people that you're running against. I mean, I haven't seen your name in a lot of articles as running, although I have seen him in some. But you have people like Rahm Emanuel, Kara Mosley Braun, Danny Davis, just names that people know, on the back of their hand. Roland Burris, Reverend Meek, all these people who are running for mayor and running against each other at this point right now. It's certainly going to be a tough race. How is the name Jay Stone going to, there's a lot of signatures necessary, certainly, and there's a lot of other, ins that you need to have. How are you going to get that name known, and how are they going to know the things that they're not, those who aren't watching our show, going to know these things? And
Well, first of all, I think there may be fewer voters today, but I think the voters are more sophisticated and intelligent. Mm-hmm. I think the viewers watching this will have enough sense to go online, go visit my website, mm-hmm. And just word of mouth. With the social networking, with Twitter, with Facebook, with email lists and blasts, you can get the word out. But you mentioned Rahm Emanuel, and here's something else you might not know. Now I'm reading from the federal court transcripts. This was from the Robert Zorich trial. Did you ever receive any instruction from Mr. Reyes or Mr. Dorr for any congressional races? Yeah. Rahm Emanuel. And what office do you recall Mr. Emanuel was running for? Congress. And the person that answered these questions is Donald Tomczak, and he was the wrongdoer in my case, and he was also the wrongdoer in Rahm Emanuel's election. So Rahm Emanuel didn't pay for his campaign workers, the city of Chicago did. And what gets me, which should upset voters even more, is just in a year and a half prior to the voters paying for 150 to 250 of Emanuel's campaign workers, Rahm Emanuel made $16.5 million, mm-hmm. according to the Tribune. And so here we are, he's running for mayor. Now this scandal, the Rahm Emanuel scandal, and the Donald Tomczak, the job rigging scandal, has cost taxpayers $184 million. Were you aware of that? No. Most of the money of the $184 million comes from $153 million, which went for personnel contracts to correct the hiring abuses. $12 million was for the class action settlement, which I was part of. Another $12 million went just to pay for the federal court monitor. So in 2009, Mayor Daley said he's cleaned up his act. He was going back to court to have the federal court monitor removed. Well, I heard that, the hair in the back of my neck stood up. So I wrote the federal court judge, Judge Wayne Anderson, who's since retired, and to me is probably one of the greatest patriots I've ever come across in my life. Never met him personally, but I know him through his work. But so I wrote Judge Judge Anderson, because when I won my Shackman Award, Mayor Daley and 4 aldermen, they tried to publicly humiliate me through their own misinterpretation of the law. And so I asked Judge Anderson to call Mayor Daley and 4 aldermen into court to clarify their comments. And I also told the judge that Mayor Daley and the aldermen didn't understand the original law, and they didn't understand the settlement that they voted for and approved it, and that they wouldn't be able to follow the law. So Mayor Daley pulled back from
his statements?
Well, no, he pulled back from having the federal court monitor removed. So the federal court monitor is still monitoring the personnel decisions. So for the last 5 years, because the monitor was installed in 2005, for the last 5 years, the federal court monitor has been observing the personnel decisions. And the city of Chicago isn't the only bureaucracy in Chicago or in Cook County with a federal court monitor. You have Cook County Sheriff, you have the Cook County Department of Corrections, Cook County Forest Preserve, and Cook County Government all have federal court monitors.
Now, these are good things. You're stating, and I would
no,
think
it's because of this dishonesty within the bureaucracies,
right,
because it violated the civil rights of job applicants, the civil rights of employees, and the civil rights of voters. And so, your show also airs in the suburbs. Well, people in the suburbs are paying for this. And Michael Shackman is planning to go back into federal court and have a federal court monitor placed in state government. So it's like our whole city, county, and state is going to be under scrutiny by the federal court because we can't obey the law.
It's unbelievable. Tell me, what are you going to do as mayor? What are you going to do? What has Mayor Daley done recently that you're going to try and undo? And how are you going to handle the parking meter situation? We're locked in on a contract. The money is almost gone compared to what there was. It's been spent because of the budget crisis that the mayor has led us to. What are you going to do to change things from what Mayor Daley's done?
Well, first of all, I think one of the most important things, it's called transparency. So think of, if something's transparent, you can look inside what's going on. And the courts have ruled that it used to be under the First Amendment right, the right to petition the government, that people can get access to public records. Our taxes are paying for government. We should get to know. We should know what we're paying for, and, unless it's national security or some other type of security issue, then maybe that can be excluded. And now there's the Freedom of Information Act. But even with the Freedom of Information Act, it's still very difficult. So Mayor Daley has done a great job of hiding information. So for one is transparency. So for example, when I ran for alderman in 2003, I made that an issue. With the city council records, the city council still uses the same record-keeping system today that it did in 1920. I swear to God, if you went to the Harold Washington Library, there's municipal libraries kept there, and you picked up a city council journey from 2010, and you picked up one from 1920, it's the same. We don't number our ordinances. There are high schools and grade schools that have like student councils that number what they do. So you can't track the ordinances between committees and from the city council floor to a committee, etc. Things like that, putting contracts online. And this is, I proposed, they play a shell game. You cannot find information. For example, the Board of Ethics collects information for lobbyists. Now, lobbyists are important because those are the people that are influencing the mayor and the alderman and key personnel and decisions. So the city just keeps a list of registered lobbyists, but lobbyists also submit forms with the number of contacts, who they're contacting, the reason for the contacts. The lobbyists also submit forms for expenses, so you can see and also how much money they're making. You know, it was lobbyists who the Chicago parking meters hired lobbyists to push the parking meter lease through. And it's interesting because I did bring in something that I uncovered through a Freedom of Information request, that I discovered that the parking meter lease, Morgan Stanley set up two separate companies, one for the parking meter lease, one for the garage lease. So, you know, and I'm thinking 2009, 2010, Morgan Stanley was having registered lobbyists. I'm going, what are they up to? So I filed a Freedom of Information request. And now had this been in New York or Los Angeles, I could have had this information in about 2 or 3 minutes online. I had to go downtown twice and spend, you know, look through stacks of records like this, you know, and it's all the information is all hidden. So, you know, so what I've discovered, I've had a couple attorneys look at it, that they're sharing the parking meter lease and the parking garage company. They're sharing key personnel and key equipment, and but again, I'm still filing Freedom of Information requests with Department of Finance, Department of Revenue, the Mayor's office. I want to know what the hell's going on. Mm-hmm. You know,
and to be a mayor, you want to know what's going on.
Well, right. You know, and I brought this to attention to an alderman, not my father, and the alderman was embarrassed. He said, "Jay, I should have known this." Mm-hmm. And he said, "You know, Jay, you know more about corruption than I do."
Yeah, I believe it, and I would have never guessed. I mean, knowing you and all the things that you're involved with and everything, that you are so able to focus on all this too and know it so well, it's just amazing. You must spend 24 hours a day working on this information.
You
got to know your stuff to run for mayor.
I'm just very good at it, you know, and I think and so I know how this corrupt system was designed and set up, hence why I was against the Olympics, among other reasons, but I also know how to stop it. And so with transparency comes another key component of good politics or honest politics, and that is accountability. So we have to be able to hold the mayor and the alderman accountable for their decisions. And Mayor Daley has not been held accountable at the polls. He started his illegal job rigging scheme and election rigging scheme before he took office in 1988. He was sworn in 1989, but he was already making deals in violation of the federal court decree while he was running, because those deals that he made, he was able to get campaign workers to get him over the top and win the election. And so he kept that illegal patronage system in violation of the federal court decree going from 1989 to 2004 when the FBI uncovered it. And if the FBI hadn't uncovered it, would still be going on today. What
would you say today, outside of the things we talked about, is the biggest issue for a new mayor? Is it balancing the budget? Is it corruption? Is it crime? I mean, what is the mayor's number one responsibility?
I don't think there's
too many.
Well, our budget now, the city council passed a budget for 2011, but passing a budget and a balanced budget are two different things. And so when the city passes a budget, they're forecasting the revenues, and so and they're also forecasting their expenditures. But there's certain fixed expenses like employees, equipment, utility costs, etc. But the budget that the city council passed is over $500 million shortfall. And I've got a feeling it's going to be a lot bigger shortfall once the new mayor takes office. You've got the issues of education. We are doing horribly underperforming, and the expense for education is I think it's like 1 out of 2 tax dollars. I could be wrong, but it's immense. It's absolutely immense, and the teachers are scheduled for increases in the upcoming year. And then there's the crime. The crime. It's it was a big issue around the Olympics, and it's just it's
bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I was driving through some wards on the other side of the city from where I live, and happened to be seeing some, going to see some people who were sick, and the people on the streets, the graffiti, which thank God on the north side we've been really lucky and good at getting rid of as it comes along. And I know they can't get everything at once, but the Graffiti Busters is a great program.
Yeah.
But it's certainly more prominent in the crime. But the boarded up buildings and abandoned buildings, they just beg for crime, and I don't see those changing in those neighborhoods, in those areas. They're not tearing down those buildings. They're sitting boarded up for years sometimes.
All that was fueled by campaign contributions because the Tribune did a wonderful story. They called it Neighborhoods for Sale. Mm-hmm. But really it should have been Aldermen for Sale, mm-hmm. because what they were showing was that the aldermen with the most rezonings also took in the most campaign contributions. And so one of the proposals that I made is banning pay-to-play contributions. That's something that we can take away from the Rod Blagojevich trial. When the judge of the Rod Blagojevich trial, Judge Zagel, gave jury instructions, he said it's not unlawful for public officials to ask for campaign contributions from people who have business before them. And so, you know how the pay-to-play campaign contributions work?
Sort of.
Well, I'll clue you in as well as our audience.
Viewers.
Let's say you come to me and said, Jay, I want to rezone. I want to put this beautiful health club in. It's a multi-million-dollar club. I'm going to make a fortune. It's the best location. I go, okay.
How much are you contributing to me?
No, I can't do that.
I know
I can't.
I know.
So, but 3 days later, I call you up and saying, Rabbi Doug, I'm having a fundraiser. I'd love you to come. And while you're at it, you can buy a table. And you say, well, what about the rezoning? And I go, oh, we can't talk about that now. Uh-huh. So as long as you keep the two conversations separate, to me that's a bunch of hooey, voodoo political contributions. But what I do know is that there are several states that have banned pay-to-play contributions, and there's several cities, and so that we can ban pay-to-play contributions in Chicago.
I hope so. Jay, it's just been enlightening to talk about this with you because we never talk politics on the air. I want to thank you so much. Jay Stone, much success in your running for mayor of the city of Chicago and in all your endeavors. And want to thank you for being on the show today. Want to thank all of you. Remember, check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can find out more about our guests and watch our show on the web. And if you want to email me or email Jay, I'll forward the email to him, and I know he'll get back to you. info@tvrabbi.com is the email address. Once again, I want to thank you, Jay Stone. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Hope to see you next time right here on Tape with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.